It starts back about 8 years ago, or actually 9 years ago, when I found out that I had stage 4 lymphoma. I'm a photographer and I shoot weddings for a living. As I was working one day, I felt really faint. I wasn't quite sure what was happening to me, and I was like, oh my God, maybe I didn't eat, or maybe I ate something bad. I feel like I can't really think straight. I'm not quite sure what's happening to my body. It was almost an out-of-body experience that I was having at that point, because I've never felt that before. What was really happening to me was a lymph node had gotten big. It was swollen, and it was pushing against my carotid artery on my right-hand side, so the blood going to my brain was no longer sufficient. I didn't know this, and the funny thing is, every time this would happen and I would get these severe headaches, I would go into the hospital and I would go through the emergency, and they would give me some painkillers, up to even I think I even got Dilaudid at one point, and they would send me home. And twice over they sent me home, whatever, no big deal. I didn't know what was happening to me, so I just went home. Now, around end of April in 2010, I was at my in-laws' home. At that time, I was supposed to get married in July of 2010. And I was there, and maybe about 30 minutes in, I just fainted. It was probably my first time ever fainting. And then, what looked like a seizure has happened. I didn't know this, but my wife, when we went to the hospital, said, Siva had a seizure. So they hooked me up to all these machines, checked for a seizure, looked at my head, did some MRIs. They're like, nothing's wrong. You should go home. Here's more Dilaudid. So I went home. Now these pass-outs were happening a lot more recurring and a lot more common. Every other day almost. And I had gone to the hospital about 6 times. And finally, a oncologist looked at me and said, I think we need to check and do a biopsy on you. I think it's about time we kind of take you in and admit you. I was like, didn't know what to think at that time. I didn't know that I had stage 4 lymphoma. But Dr. Kiraga took me in, and I was at the Scarborough Hospital by Nielsen Road, if you guys know where that is. And I got admitted, and about 2 days later, the doctor came up to me and said, you have a very fast-growing cancer that has gone into your liver, and it's pretty much in stage 4 at this point. You will have to figure out a way to get your things in order. I didn't know what that meant, have your things in order. It's May, and I'm like, I've got things to get in order. I gotta get married, and maybe one day I gotta have kids. I have to see my friends. And at this time, my best friends, they would quit work and literally spend every day with me. They were the only ones who I've told, I'm an only child. And I'm an only child to one parent, my mom. If mothers are here and they're looking at their sons going, you've got a month to live, I knew my mom couldn't handle that, so I didn't tell her that. I didn't even tell my wife-to-be at that point because we weren't married yet. I didn't know if she would stick around. And along with this, I had 4 best friends who would show up every day and they would keep me company, and they were the only ones who knew that maybe by June, the carotid artery would be pushed so hard that I would no longer get any blood to my brain, and that means, I probably wouldn't be standing here and talking to you if that actually came true. But so there I was. Now it's time for me me to go into ICU because I'm practically fainting every 10 minutes. And so I spent about 20 days in ICU, and I spent another 30 days in CCU. At this time, they did a biopsy, they cut my throat. I sounded like Christian Bale in Batman for a while, and that was really fun. I was making jokes and running around and just, as much as you could in a CCU room, it seems like a little jail cell. I've always kept my spirits up. I believe that if you manifest something, that sometimes could happen, and I've kept up that belief. And so, something really special happened. My doctor, who happens to be an academic in this field, has spoken about my case to another doctor who was doing clinical trials with a medicine called Rituxan at the time. Are you guys familiar with that? Anyone? Maybe? It's a chemotherapy drug. So, my doctor had spoken to this doctor, who then said, try giving this drug to this guy. We'll kind of put him on the clinical trial, on the side. What do we gotta lose? If he has 1 month? Big deal, right? So, there I was getting chemotherapy for the first time, and something weird happened. The next 3 days later, I pulled my hair, and it just came off in my hand. And that was interesting. But at the same time, I could now not pass out. So this special event led for me to be transported over to Sunnybrook, where I was now put under this research program. It's really interesting how I had to go through about 9 hospital visits before someone knew what I actually had. It was also interesting that it took one special person to figure out what this was and to actually speak of it outside of their environment, perhaps in events like this. So I don't know how he managed to do it, but that little interaction, I think, saved my life. And hands up to all the researchers and people who do work in their own silos. Can I say that? Amazing. Your work, I think, doesn't end in where you are, because your work is your legacy, and I think your work carries with you. Your work is, and something that I say weirdly, it's like, you're like a tea bag in hot water. You have to steep into everything, and everywhere you'll find that one place where you might be able to help. And so I am so happy for that one man who took his work home and decided to talk to another person about it. My experience with the clinical trial was, for lack of another word, beautiful, because I learned so much about how they work and about my body being in the hospital for over 1.5 years. Yeah, I went through a lot of different trials and tribulations. At one point, I was quarantined because my platelets was like 7, right? I couldn't look down at the ground because I got vertigo. And I had an infection that went through my thigh and I could see my bone. Really weird shit, but it was beautiful. You know why? Because I'm in love. The work you do is I'm here because of people like the doctor and everyone else who's done the work that you guys do. So, it might be weird for you to have this, the first time I had that out-of-body experience where I didn't know what I had. Perhaps you may not realize the power that you have. So I'm your out-of-body experience telling you, thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for saving my life.